Imagine a picture so surreal that it seems like a glitch in the matrix of reality itself, a hallucination caused by an overdose of 70s pop culture. You are in San Diego at the sports arena. The calendar says March 31st, 1973, and the air is thick with the smell of cheap beer, cigarette smoke, and testosterone. The crowd is roaring, awaiting the entrance of Muhammad Ali, the most dangerous man on the planet, the symbol of the Black Revolution, the Muslim who defied the U.S. government. You expect to see him in his usual ascetic white robe that has become his uniform, a symbol of purity and warrior discipline. But when the curtain parts and the spotlights catch the figure of the champion, the hall does not explode in ovation. It freezes for a fraction of a second in collective stupor, because the eyes of the spectators refuse to believe what they are seeing. Ali is not wearing his boxing gear. Instead, he is wearing something that looks like a costume for an alien landing in Las Vegas. A dazzlingly white, heavy robe with a giant standing collar, encrusted with thousands, tens of thousands of shimmering rhinestones that refract the light so fiercely it is painful to look at. This is not just clothing. It is a monument to kitsch, a screaming luxury more suited for a cabaret stage than the bloody square of a ring. On the back of this glittering madness, a name is laid out in precious stones, but it is not Muhammad Ali. It says, "The People's Choice." The spectators begin to whisper. Some laugh, some whistle in bewilderment. What is this? The greatest new joke? Another PR stunt? A mockery of his opponent, Ken Norton, who looks gray and inconspicuous against this backdrop of magnificence. But no one in that arena, including Ali himself, suspected that this robe was not just an extravagant gift. It is our dagger, a cursed artifact that carries not the energy of victory, but a virus of destruction. And this virus was passed to Ali by a man who had already begun to rot alive in his own golden cage. This robe was a gift from Elvis Presley. The king of rock and roll personally ordered it from his tailor, spending $3,000 on it, a sum for which, in 1973, one could buy a new car. Elvis, the icon of white conservative America, gave it to Ali, the icon of black radicalism. It seemed like a match made in heaven, a meeting of two titans who stood above race and politics. Ali stepped out in this robe, feeling invulnerable, feeling as though Elvis's magic was now flowing through his veins. He danced around the ring during the introduction, letting the folds of the robe flutter like an angel's wings, but he failed to notice one terrifying detail that turns the meaning of what was happening upside down. This robe was heavy, physically heavy. The rhinestones and the thick fabric weighed several kilograms, and while Ali preened before the cameras, this extra weight pressed on his shoulders, restricted his movements, and overheated his body even before the fight began. No, the metaphysical weight was even more frightening. In 1973, Elvis Presley was no longer that young rebel who changed music. He was a man slowly dying of gluttony, pills, and loneliness at his Graceland estate. By giving this robe, Elvis seemed to pass on to Ali a piece of his own curse, the curse of an idol whom the crowd loves to death, literally devouring his flesh with their eyes. Ali, putting on this gift, voluntarily stepped into the skin of another king, not realizing that this skin was poisoned. Ask yourself, do you believe in omens? Ali was superstitious, like any boxer, but that evening his ego drowned out his survival instinct. He thought the rhinestones would make him brighter. He didn't realize they made him a target. Ken Norton, his opponent, watched this circus from his corner with cold hatred. He saw before him not a fighter, but a showman, a peacock who had become too obsessed with his plumage. And while Ali bathed in the rays of glory, absorbing the energy of the crowd, Norton was tuning himself to smash this shimmering magnificence to pieces. When the referee gave the command to remove the robes, Ali cast off the gift. The heavy fabric fell to the floor, and assistants carried it to the corner. It seemed Ali was free. He remained in his classic white trunks, ready to fight. But this is where the Santa Barbara effect kicks in. You can take off the clothes, but you cannot take off the karma that has stuck to them. Elvis's shadow remained in the ring. The atmosphere in the hall changed. The merriment vanished, giving way to an anxious waiting. Ali looked a fraction slower than usual. His gaze was out of focus, as if the glare of the rhinestones had blinded not only the spectators, but him as well. He went out for the first round, expecting an easy stroll, expecting that the magic of the people's choice would protect him. But he forgot that in the ring, they don't vote with ballots, but with fists. And at the moment the bell rang, no one, not the 12,000 spectators in San Diego, nor the millions at their TVs, knew that this fight would be the beginning of the end for the celestial Ali, and that Elvis's white robe would become a shroud for his invincibility. He put it on to shine, but instead he put on a bullseye that fate was about to shoot with deadly accuracy in just a few rounds. To understand why this shimmering robe became not just a garment, but a shroud, we must take a journey through time and space that seems even more incredible than the scene in the ring itself. We must move from the sweaty gym to the sterile, hairspray-scented, air-conditioned luxury of a Hilton hotel suite in Las Vegas. You are likely wondering, what could Muhammad Ali, the radical black Muslim who publicly called white people devils, and Elvis Presley, the white boy from the South who collected police badges and met with Nixon to inform on anti-war activists, possibly have in common? Logic suggests they should have been mortal enemies, ideological antipodes, ready to tear each other's throats at the first meeting. But when the doors of the penthouse closed, cutting them off from screaming fans and greedy managers, something happened that breaks all stereotypes of the 70s. They looked into each other's eyes and saw their not skin color or politics, but their own reflection, distorted by pain. In that room met not two men, but the two loneliest prisoners on planet Earth. Ask yourself honestly, what is it like to be a god, loved by millions, but heard by no one? Elvis was a hostage of his manager, Colonel Parker, who squeezed the life out of him drop by drop, forcing him to give 2 concerts a night, pumping him with pills so he could stand, and sleeping pills so he could sleep. Ali was a hostage of the Nation of Islam and Herbert Muhammad, who used him as an ATM, forcing him to fight when his body begged for rest. At the moment they embraced, without cameras, without the press, they realized they were brothers in misfortune, locked in identical golden cages. It was from this feeling of deep, cosmic loneliness that the white robe was born. You think Elvis gave it for PR? That is a cynical lie. Elvis spent weeks working with designers, choosing every stone, every thread. He put his soul into this gift. He wanted to give Ali a piece of his stage magic. He wanted Ali to feel like a king, not just in words, but visually. He wrote "The People's Choice" on the back because he sincerely believed that only the people's love matters when your own inner circle betrays you. But this is where that same Santa Barbara effect comes into play, turning good intentions into a curse. Elvis, without knowing it, passed on to Ali not his strength, but his weakness. In 1973, Elvis had already begun his slow, agonizing descent into the abyss. He was getting fat, his speech was becoming slurred, his heart was working at its limit due to a cocktail of drugs. He was dying in front of the whole world, yet the world applauded, demanding more songs, more hip movements. By gifting the robe, he seemed to drape the shadow of his own doom over Ali's shoulders. Ali accepted the gift with childish delight, not realizing he was putting on the energy of a man who had already given up. He thought those rhinestones were armor. In reality, they were shards of a mirror reflecting his own future, a future where he too would be exploited until his last breath, where he too would be displayed for the public's amusement even when he could no longer speak. And here we are again at the arena in San Diego. Ali stands in the corner of the ring. The robe is off, but its weight hasn't gone anywhere. Ken Norton, a former Marine, a man who made a living sparring for $500, watches Ali from the opposite corner. Norton didn't receive gifts from the kings of rock. He didn't live in luxury suites. He was hungry, angry, and intensely focused. He saw this dress-up circus and took it as a personal insult. While Ali played the role of a superstar, bathing in the rays of someone else's glory, Norton was visualizing how he would smash that beautiful picture to pieces. The viewer at this moment senses something is wrong. Ali looks too relaxed. He jokes with the referee. He winks at the girls in the front row. He believes the script is written in advance. The king will step out. The king will strike. The king will win. But he forgot that boxing is not a Vegas concert. You can't lip sync here. Here, every missed punch is real. And that same invisible thread that tied Ali and Elvis began to tighten, preparing to choke the champion. Ali entered the fight not as a warrior ready to die, but as an idol ready to receive worship. He was poisoned by the same venom that was killing Elvis, the venom of overconfidence and detachment from reality. The bell rang, and the first round began. Ali started to dance, but his movements were a fraction of a second slower than usual. His punches were light, careless. He did not respect Norton. He was thinking about how beautiful he looked in that robe. But Norton didn't dance. He moved forward, head held low, and in his gloves, he clutched not magic, but cast iron. Ali took punches and smiled, showing the crowd he wasn't hurt. It was the same smile Elvis gave the audience when he forgot the lyrics of songs because of the pills. A smile hiding a catastrophe. And at that moment, as the first round neared its end and Ali continued to play for the audience, fate, dressed in Ken Norton's gloves, prepared a surprise that would make him forget about rhinestones, about greatness, and about friendship with kings, returning him to the brutal, bloody reality where every mistake is paid for not with money, but with bone. Have you ever heard the sound a career makes when it breaks? Usually, we think it's the roar of an unhappy crowd or the judge's bell. But in the second round of the fight in San Diego, that sound was completely different. It was a dry, sickening snap, like a breaking branch that echoed inside Muhammad Ali's skull. Ken Norton, this unknown former Marine whom no one took seriously, threw an uppercut that didn't just pierce the greatest defense, it shattered his jaw into small fragments. In the second the glove slammed into the bone, Ali's world turned upside down. Do you think he fell? Do you think he stopped the fight? That would have been logical. That would have been human. No, this is where that same Santa Barbara effect kicks in, turning a sports drama into a horror story. Ali did not fall. He didn't even stumble. He continued to dance. But if you had looked into his eyes at that moment, you would have seen there not strategy or thrill, but the pure, distilled terror of a man who suddenly realized he was mortal. Ask yourself, how can you fight 10 more rounds when your jaw is dangling, held only by skin, and your mouth is filling with salty hot blood that you have to swallow so the referee doesn't notice the injury? This wasn't bravery. It was agony stretched over 40 minutes. Every time Norton touched his face, Ali felt a jolt of pain comparable to an electric shock, but he kept standing. Why? Because he was a hostage to that very image of the people's choice that was embroidered in rhinestones on his back. He couldn't afford to lose to some Norton while wearing a mantle gifted by the king of rock and roll. He believed that Elvis's magic, the magic of his own legend, would pull him through, that at the end of the movie, the hero always wins. But the reality of 1973 wasn't written in Hollywood. By the 12th round, the hall fell silent. It was that very visual silence that makes your ears ring. Spectators stopped whistling and jeering because they began to realize something terrible was happening. Ali no longer floated. He was surviving. His face swelled, turning into a formless mask, and a thin stream of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth, which he could no longer hide. Ken Norton, smelling blood, moved forward like a tank, methodically destroying the myth of Ali's invulnerability. And when the final bell rang, Ali did not throw up his hands. He trudged to his corner, and in his gait was the weight of all the sins of the world. He knew the judge's decision even before it was announced. The winner, Ken Norton. Those words fell into the silence of the hall like stones. Ali had lost, for the second time in his life, but for the first time while at his peak, while the favorite, while the king. He was led from the ring under the thin applause of a shocked crowd, and the procession moved to the locker room. And here, behind closed doors, where there were no cameras or fans, a scene took place that is the key to this whole story. Ali sat on a wooden bench, pressing an ice pack to his mutilated face. He couldn't speak. His jaw was broken so badly that doctors would later say it was a miracle he remained conscious at all. But his eyes darted around the room until they stopped on one object lying in the corner. There, on the dirty gray concrete floor, among used towels, empty water bottles, and bloody bandages, lay that same white rhinestone robe, Elvis's gift, the symbol of greatness. 5 minutes ago, it had shone under the spotlights, cost $3,000, and personified the union of two gods. Now it looked like a rag, like trash, like the shed skin of a snake that had died. Ali looked at this robe, and in his pain-clouded brain, one thought began to pulse, terrifying in its obviousness. This is not just a defeat. This is a warning. Do you understand what he felt at that moment? He suddenly saw a parallel he had previously refused to notice. Elvis, in giving this robe, wished him no harm, but he had passed on his karma, the karma of a man whom the crowd only loves as long as he stands on his feet and entertains them. Elvis was dying in his golden cage, growing fat and swallowing pills to drown the pain of having become a parody of himself. And Ali, by putting on this robe, had become part of this freak show. He stepped into the ring not as a fighter, but as a cabaret artist, and life punished him for it with a broken bone. The robe on the floor looked like the corpse of their friendship, the corpse of their invulnerability. Ali tried to say something to his trainer, Angelo Dundee, but could only manage a moan. He pointed his hand at the robe. The gesture was sharp, disgusted, full of superstitious horror. "Take it away," was written in his eyes. "Take it away from me. This is a dead man's thing. It is cursed." He realized that the glitter of the rhinestones had blinded him, made him forget that in boxing, as in life, they hit the face, not the costume. In that stifling locker room, soaked in the smell of defeat, Muhammad Ali for the first time feared not an opponent, but the force that was destroying Elvis and had now come for him. He realized that if he didn't take off this crown of fake diamonds, he would end up just like his friend from Memphis, lonely, broken, and forgotten, despite all the titles in the world. The robe remained in the corner, a silent witness to the collapse of illusions, and Ali vowed to himself that he would never again let the tinsel of show business stand between him and the reality of a fight. But he didn't know that the curse of kings isn't so easily removed, and that this mechanism broken in San Diego had already started a countdown that would lead one of them to death in a bathroom and the other to the eternal trembling of hands. 4 years flew by like one long, blurred chime of a bell, and we moved to the stifling August of 1977, to the day when the music didn't just stop. It choked on its own vomit on the tiled floor of a bathroom in Memphis. You likely think the story of the white robe, which Ali threw in disgust into a corner of the San Diego locker room, ended that same evening in 1973. You are deeply mistaken. Cursed things don't disappear so easily. They leave behind phantom pains, and on August 16th, when the phone in Muhammad Ali's house shattered the silence with an alarming ring, the champion realized that the prediction embroidered in rhinestones on his back had come true with terrifying surgical precision. The voice on the other end of the line delivered news the brain refused to believe. Elvis Presley, the king, his friend and brother in the golden cage, was dead. He was only 42 years old. Ask yourself, what do you feel when a god dies? Shock? Grief? But for Ali, this was something much more personal and terrifying. It was a look into the mirror of the future. Elvis didn't die like a hero, not in battle and not on stage. He died a humiliating, grotesque death, sitting on a toilet, bloated from burgers and pills, with a heart that burst from the inability to pump blood through a body that had become a grave for his soul. And at that moment, Ali, listening to the details, overdose, loneliness, the betrayal of his inner circle, felt the cold hand of fear squeeze his own heart, because he saw that same parallel he had been pushing away for years. The viewer at this moment expects tears, expects beautiful words about the loss, but this is where that same Santa Barbara effect kicks in, turning the entire perception upside down. Ali did not cry. He froze in the visual silence of his consciousness, because he suddenly realized he was doing the same thing to himself, only his drug was named differently. Elvis was killing himself with barbiturates to drown the pain of becoming a parody of himself, to have the strength to go out to the crowd demanding "Love me tender." And what was Ali doing? In that same year of 1977, just a month after Elvis's death, he stepped into the ring against Ernie Shavers, the Acorn Man, the boxer with the strongest punch in heavyweight history. Do you remember that fight? It wasn't a sport. It was a public execution stretched over 15 rounds. Ali took punches of such force they could have felled a horse. His head snapped back with frightening regularity. His brain slammed against the walls of his skull, turning into mush, but he didn't fall. Why? Because he, like Elvis, was an addict. His drug was the roar of the crowd, the glare of the spotlights, the need to be the people's choice. He knew he should leave. Doctors told him his reflexes were dying. His kidneys were failing. He was beginning to mumble. But he couldn't stop. He was a hostage of the same mechanism that killed Presley. Greedy managers, Colonel Parker for one, Herbert Muhammad for the other, whispered in their ears, "One more show, one more fight. The public needs this." And they went to the slaughter. That night, after the Shavers fight, Ali sat in the locker room, and the lights in the room were turned off to let his eyes rest. In the darkness, he perhaps again saw that ghostly glint of rhinestones. The inscription on the back of that robe, "The People's Choice," now read not as a title, but as a sentence. The people chose them, and the people decided to devour them alive. The crowd did not want to let its idols retire. It wanted to see them in the arena until the last breath, until the last drop of blood. Elvis fulfilled this contract, dying young and leaving a beautiful corpse. Ali, however, possessing a stronger body, was doomed to a more terrible fate. He survived, but the price for that survival was higher than death. It was in 1977, standing at the crossroads between life and legend, that Ali made his fatal choice. Elvis's death should have been a stop signal for him, a red flare screaming that one cannot be a god forever. He could have walked away then, preserving the remains of his health, preserving his speech, his charisma. But he looked at Elvis's fate and drew a conclusion that seems like madness. I am stronger. I will not break. He decided to prove he could win where the king of rock lost. This was pride, that very hubris from Greek tragedies, which is punished by the gods with special cruelty. Ali continued to fight. He took a fight with Leon Spinks, then a rematch, then that same nightmare fight with Larry Holmes. He turned his body into a shield, taking the blows of fate, thinking he was paying for greatness. But in reality, he was paying for fear. The fear of remaining in silence, the fear of becoming ordinary, the fear that killed Elvis in the bathroom. Two kings, two icons, two prisoners of their own fame, walked toward the same cliff, just at different speeds. Elvis burned like a match, flashing and going out. Ali began to smolder like coal, slowly losing light, heat, and form, until he turned into a gray, trembling shadow of himself. And that discarded robe, lying somewhere in the landfill of history, became the symbol of their shared tragedy, a shiny wrapper hiding emptiness, pain, and the loneliness of a man who belongs to everyone except himself. Ali realized this too late, when his hands began to tremble, just as Elvis's hands had trembled, reaching for the last pill. Today, when we look at a black and white photograph where Muhammad Ali and Elvis Presley stand side by side, embracing, both at the peak of their beauty, both with that divine glow in their eyes given only to the chosen, a strange, aching sense of nostalgia for the era of Titans grips us. But if you allow yourself to turn off the sentimentality for a second and turn on the cynicism, you will see in this shot not two friends, but two hostages smiling at the camera lens, already knowing that behind the scenes, executioners await them. You likely think their fates diverged the moment Elvis dropped dead in 1977, while Ali lived on for another 40 years, becoming a global symbol of peace and humanism. That is the convenient, comforting lie biographers feed us so we don't go mad from the horror of reality. But the truth is that their fates did not diverge. They simply chose different ways of carrying out the same death sentence issued by the crowd. Remember that white rhinestone robe, that same dagger we left lying on the floor of the San Diego locker room. The inscription on the back, "The People's Choice," turned out to be not a metaphor, but a curse, working with ruthless mechanical precision. The people chose them, and the people demanded a sacrifice from them. Elvis, that southern boy, with the voice of an angel, chose the path of rapid chemical agony. He allowed fame to devour his heart, drowning the pain of loneliness with handfuls of pills, and leaving behind a beautiful corpse and an eternal mystery. Ali, however, that warrior with the soul of a poet, chose the path of slow, agonizing decline, allowing fame to devour his brain, punch by punch, until only a trembling shell remained of the greatest. Ask yourself honestly, which is more terrifying? To die young, at 42, in the loneliness of your bathroom, but remain in people's memory as the eternally young rebel in a leather jacket? Or to live to 74, but spend the last 3 decades locked in a body that has turned into a stone prison? Ali outlived Elvis by a whole lifetime, but was it a life? He, whose tongue was faster than lightning, who could talk down any dictator, spent 30 years in complete silence, unable to say even a word to his grandchildren. He, whose feet danced the shuffle, could not independently bring a spoon to his mouth. He turned into a living monument to himself, an icon carried around the world so people could touch his greatness, not realizing that inside the statue a living man was screaming, begging for freedom. This is precisely where that intellectual orgasm of realizing the tragedy occurs, when the puzzle snaps into the final terrifying picture. That robe was right. They both became victims of the people's choice. We, the public, did not want to let them go. We demanded songs from Elvis even when he was suffocating. We demanded fights from Ali even when he was urinating blood. We applauded their self-destruction, calling it devotion to art and will to victory. The robe, encrusted with fake diamonds, became the symbol of the exchange they made. They gave us their souls in exchange for our love, but that love turned out to be toxic. It demanded the total, absolute utilization of the carrier. Ali threw away the robe, trying to break the connection, but he could not throw away his need to be loved. In the final years, when he was brought to ceremonies and the hall stood up in ovation, in his eyes, the only part of his body that remained alive, one could read a strange mix of gratitude and horror. He understood that this applause was the sound under which he had been dying his whole life. He looked at the crowd and perhaps saw there the shadow of Elvis winking at him from eternity, as if saying, "I told you, brother. They love us to death, literally." And now, when both kings have gone, leaving us alone with their songs and fights, I want to ask you a question. That might seem cruel, but it is necessary to understand the nature of fame. Look at their finales. Look at Elvis, bloated and dead at 42. Look at Ali, trembling and mute at 74. Whose fate seems more merciful to you? If you were offered this devilish choice to flash and burn out instantly, leaving pain for your loved ones, or to smolder for decades, becoming a burden to yourself, but seeing your children grow, what would you choose? A quick death in loneliness, or a long life in the captivity of your own body before the eyes of billions? Who among them actually won this race with death? Elvis, who left the party before it turned ugly, or Ali, who stayed until the very end to turn out the lights, but paid for it with every nerve of his organism? Whose side are you on in this tragedy of two kings? Write your opinion in the comments, because your answer will speak not of them, but of you, of what you fear more, death or helplessness. I will wait for your words, because the silence of Ali and Elvis has already told us everything we needed to know about the price paid for being the people's choice.